Good afternoon. I am here with Dr. Robert DiGregorio, President of the State Council from 2023 to 2024. When you joined the State Council, Bob, were you a staff member, a management, a resident, a clinical coordinator? What was your initial staff, I should say, or position
When I became president or when I joined the council?
when you joined the council?
Oh, when I joined the council. Um, I was faculty at Long Island University and a clinical pharmacist at Brookdale Hospital in the emergency department.
Who did you meet that made you want to advance in the organization?
I worked with Seymour Katz at Brookdale, and Seymour was um, a big advocate for the council and got me involved almost, I'd say, literally on day one there. Um, and he and I actually used to co-author an ethics column in the old journal of the council that we used to publish each in every volume that came out. We had an ethics article that we would take counterpoint on. That was probably my initiation into the council.
You mentioned Seymour Katz. How many of the previous past presidents did you know, and what were they like?
Over the course of the years, I've known so many. I got to work with Seymour for many years up until his passing. And then Kazi Halim was his successor at Brookdale. So I worked with Kazi for a number of years. And then had the opportunity after leaving Brookdale to work with Dave Edelman for about a year or so. So those were the people I directly worked for that had been past presidents. But of course, I think I've come to meet and become friends with virtually every other past president that's living and some that have passed.
What challenges did you see as a member, as a board member, and as president of the organization?
Well, I think it's always been a bit of a challenge, having people rise up through the organization, finding good people to um, not just run, but to run against each other. It's an organization that predominantly made up of people who become friends and don't want to compete with their friends for positions, which sometimes makes it a challenge to have true elections. So I think that's something over the years that presents itself as a struggle. I think one of the other struggles that I've observed is just the vast size of New York State and the number of members that we have in different pockets of the state. So, the downstate chapters are very different than the upstate chapters, have different needs, different resources, different wants and desires of how to do things. And trying to bring all of those different um, perceptions and ways of doing things together to try and have kind of a more of a standardized process throughout the state is a big challenge, and perhaps it's something that we just shouldn't even try to do anymore. Just respect that the different areas have very different geographic perspectives. I think that's also a challenge that we have 9 chapters, and those chapters don't really cover the entire geography of New York. We have big gaps or parts of the state where we have pharmacists that would be great members, but they're just too many hours away from their closest chapter for it to be meaningful. And then I think the last challenge that comes immediately to mind is Probably also related to the size of the organization. We are one of the largest state affiliates of ASHP, and I think our members rightfully look for services that are in parallel with what the national organization does. But the national organization has a tremendously large staff, and we maintain an office of essentially 2 FTEs. So, we want to do everything and we want to have the fancy website and all the member services and do all the things that we see the national organization do for our state members, but we simply don't have the means, the resources to do that. And I, for one, um, me for one, as during my presidency, I struggled with that. There were things that ideas that I had that I wanted to implement that we just didn't have the manpower to not only implement it, but to keep it going into the future.
Membership always seems to be an issue. Do you remember what members wanted during your presidency? You touched on it a bit, but do you know what they were thinking that would best suit them or be in the benefit them the best, I should say.
I think the members want an organization that's responsive, that um, when they see something come out in the news or they hear something, at the water cooler that may be affecting pharmacy, they want the organization to already have been on top of it and to be out there banging on doors and either pushing something good forward and making sure that it's solidified, like maybe a new law or regulation, or if there's something bad that comes out in the press, they want us to be able to advocate for them to protect um, either their career or service, or perhaps the finances of their organization. Um, and that's an area where, um, as a volunteer organization, our advocacy efforts are somewhat limited by the number of people we can have go banging on doors and writing letters and doing that kind of stuff. But we also lack the resources to sometimes even have people in the right places at the right time to know what's going on legislatively or regulatory wise. And sometimes we find out stuff, more through the grapevine than the members realize. I think the membership expects that, we're on the phone with the governor, or we're getting a call about, something before it goes down when we're just finding out the same way that they find out. So we're sometimes a bit slow to respond to things. They would like to see more communications, both electronically and some people would still like to see, written communications, journals, mailings, and things of that nature, which would be great to be able to do everything and communicate from a variety of ways. Um, even just to market ourselves and market the profession, we don't really have the resources to go out and do ad campaigns or sponsor, different events perhaps that would maybe highlight what we do to the public, to our patients, to other professions. So there's lots of good ideas that people come up with, but we can't always fund them, or even if we can fund them, to be able to just have the human resources to implement things or to react to things in a timely manner is a challenge.
How often and where did the board of directors meet? Was it very organized and professional, or was it more camaraderie?
So I was on the board twice, non-contiguous terms. So it was a little bit different when I was a board member from when I came in as a presidential officer. Um, Initially, I'd say, in the old days, we used to meet very frequently in Albany. Um, we had moved offices around the time that I started on the board from um, one building literally next door to the next building, out of the Pisney owned building into the building where Cap Hill, our management group, resides. And I'd say we met probably, if it wasn't monthly, it was every other month in person. Most of the meetings back then were in person, and it was a full day meeting. Usually we came in the night before, we had dinner as a group. So there was ample time to kind of network and socialize with the other board members. And then the following day was usually a full day meeting with the full board until maybe 4 o'clock or so. And that was really all business. The second run on the board, which is when I came on as a president-elect, things were very different. It was post-COVID, and we had embraced the Zoom meeting as a platform. And the first year I was back on the board, I'd say all of the meetings, except for maybe the one at the annual assembly, was remote. As I entered my presidential year, we went back to a quarterly. So we had 4 meetings that were in person, and the opposite months were over Zoom. Those meetings, the Zoom meetings were 2 hours, and the in-person ones were all day. And this year, as past president, immediate past president, we'll have, I guess, 3 in-person meetings for the year, and the rest are Zoom, and kind of similar hour, format.
Were there any major mishaps or issues when you were president, which would be useful for future presidents not to repeat?
I wouldn't say there were any major mishaps. We did work very hard to take on more hours from our management person. So the person that we have through Cap Hill, we had negotiated to make her full-time and solely our person before she was split between us and other organizations. But I wouldn't really say there were any negative things, any mishaps during my year, fortunately.
When you became president, was it all you expected?
Oh, it was more than I expected. Um, I think it was challenging to bring together members of the board who were from really split across the state and had some fixed ideas about what the board could do and should do. And there seems to be a prevailing sentiment that because we're a volunteer organization, that we need to pace ourselves and not take on too much, and that bothered me. I thought that we needed to shake things up and be more responsive to the members' wants and needs. And I had gotten a lot of resistance initially, especially. So I think that was the biggest struggle coming in, was coming in with a lot of ideas and a lot of energy, and hitting some walls the first couple of months, and trying to bring the board together and to do some board development. At each of our in-person meetings, we tried to bring in a speaker, someone to work on board development and team building, and we had some good consultants come in over the course of the year. But of course, I think, I don't know if you've heard this from other past presidents, but a year is kind of too short. By the time, as you always say, tempus fugit. And I told that many a times to the current president early on, you need to kind of get on everything a little bit quicker. And, because before you know it, half the year is gone. And by the time you're actually getting everybody rowing in the same direction and pushing to get something implemented, you're running out of time. And the next president may have different ideas and may not want to, continue on. So we have just that noise every year, you know the sine waves going at different frequencies, that you lose momentum if you don't have presidents following each other that are very much in alignment with things that they want to implement and carry forward.
Okay. What was your favorite or most memorable moment as being president?
Um, hmm. I mean, a couple of notable moments were, first of all, being installed and being installed by Paul Abramowitz from ASHP. That was an honor that not any of our other presidents, I think, have had that privilege. So I started off the year with a lot of fanfare. Um, Probably, just a cumulative memorable experience was getting to know some of the other board members very close and becoming very close friends with them that, I had not necessarily, I've been more acquaintances with them before, but developing those relationships cumulatively over the year, I'd say, is probably what I take away from it most.
Now, you mentioned the annual assembly. When you became a member, what was the early assemblies that you remember? What were they like?
Um, the first couple I remember were at the Sagamore. Um, and I remember being kind of a younger faculty member at the university, and at the hospital, we had a residency program at Brookdale, and my residents would be presenting their posters. And I remember getting up there late, late at night into Lake George, and just kind of just seeing so many people and realizing what a big organization it really was, and what a big network of people there were. After having really just initially been involved at the local chapters and meeting the people there. But I remember it as a big event, a big deal. Certainly a lot of education, a lot of opportunities for the residents, and of course playing softball. That's always been one of the highlights of the annual assembly, is our industry against pharmacist softball game, which you and I have both played in over the years.
When you were, what was it like when you were president at the annual assembly? Was it busy, chaotic, sedate, with you being there?
Um, I think busy is certainly the appropriate of those choices. Not as busy for me as perhaps for Sean or Rebecca or our staff there. Fortunately, they seem to have all the logistics under control. So I kind of got to be in a more umbrella kind of role. I had a chance to really just try to like wander around and visit as many rooms and as many, members that were there. I tried not to actually sit through, any of the CE programs per se. And I think it's probably the first annual assembly that I don't think I got any CE credits at, because I was trying to just be out there and be visible and be accessible to everybody, and kind of take it all in. And of course, the highlight of the annual assembly is we had our casino night on Friday. We brought back the theme night, which had fallen by the wayside for a couple of years. And at the casino night, I was able to perform with 10 other members of the organization in our band, which we formed the year before, specifically to play at the annual assembly. So it was our second time playing, and this second time was a lot more polished, I'd say, than the first time we played. But having fun and being able to entertain our membership, especially being the president, I felt like I was kind of giving back something to the organization, not just in the leadership role, but in a fun way. So that was very memorable, and that's what I'll remember most probably about last year's annual assembly.
Generational changes. When you started, did you feel you needed to work your way up to the presidency? New members have a very different philosophy of needing a more evenly divided time between work and play. How do we help them assume these roles in the state council? And will the new members be able to move the council forward? A lot of questions.
Yeah. So I think that when I was starting out, the understanding, and I wouldn't say it was a rule, but the understanding was that it would take you about 10 years to move up in your ranks through the organization if you were motivated to do so. You would get on a committee or do some committee level activity, and maybe do that for a couple of years. And then perhaps you got onto the board in that same domain that your committee fell under, and then you'd serve on the board for, maybe even a couple of terms, and then maybe, move into an officer level position. So there was probably a few years of getting your feet wet, then getting involved in committees, and then getting onto the board, and then ultimately, running for a higher level office. And now more recently, I see a lot of people who, and this applies at the chapter level as well. So I see a lot of people who, historically would have been a chapter president, chapter officer, and president, and then worked their way up through that cascade that I kind of just rambled through. Now I think we see people coming right out of school sometimes, or residency, and becoming president of their local chapter, and they stop at that point. They kind of get a little burnt out after being a chapter president, maybe a little too early, a little too soon in their career. Or we have a handful of people that do jump from chapter leadership and want to run for president of the state level organization without going through the kind of the ranks of being on the board for a number of years, and kind of learning how all the committees function and how the different divisions of the board function. So I do feel like the typical slate of candidates now is a much younger slate with less experience than when I started out in the organization. It would have been unheard of back then, for someone to be running for president who was still considered a young practitioner. And that's not uncommon now.
Okay. Any final parting nuggets you'd want to give to future members who want to become president?
I would highly encourage it, and I would encourage it as a long-term plan. I think there's huge value to kind of coming up through the ranks and learning the organization, learning the people, understanding not only how things work, but how they work differently in different parts of the state. And, every chapter is different. Um, every chapter has different resources and different expectations. It's very, I think, dangerous to come in with just one perspective, and coming right out of a chapter and trying to become president very quickly. I think you miss out on all of that nuance. So I think what I would recommend to people who are so inspired would be to, take lots of notes of your ideas and look at it as a long-term progression, and try and be very active on committees and get onto the board and develop, propose, promote, develop the things that you think are good for the organization and the profession, long before you are going to be in the presidential role, so that you can kind of solidify them as president, not necessarily start things from scratch that will be very hard to finish in 1 year.
Okay, thank you so much. With that, we'll end the official historical meeting.